Okay, welcome to the StageLeft Podcast, lifting the veil on the music industry by telling the stories of those with a unique vantage point. This podcast exists to provide free educational content for young artists entering an increasingly complex industry by telling the stories of some of the unsung heroes behind the success. So go to the stageleftpodcast.com for all episodes featuring musicians who discuss in detail the writing, recording and performing processes with the likes of the Smashing Pumpkins, Earth, Wind and Fire, Queen, The Fall, Radiohead, The Stone Roses, Gorillaz, Oasis, Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, Guns N' Roses, Jeff Lynne's ELO and Kraftwerk. Today we're joined by Ben Sturley, one of the world's most sought-after composers and bassists who has written much for award-winning films and has a unique perspective of playing world tours and the likes of Saturday Night Live and Jimmy Fallon's show as bassist and band leader for global megastar Selena Gomez, as well as collaborating with none other than Booker T. Jones, Travis Barker and Weezer. Today we'll do a deep dive into what global mega fame looks like in reality from a few meters away, what emerging artists needs to do or not do to navigate something similar in their careers, how to best approach writing a score to a brief, and what else needs to change in the music industry. So it's a pleasure to say that our guest today on the StageLeft Podcast is none other than Ben Sturley. Thanks for joining us today, Ben. How's it going?
Hey, Chris. Thanks for having me, man. Really happy to be here. I am doing well today. It's a gloomy morning in Los Angeles, and just here in my studio working away. How are you?
Yeah, we're doing pretty good. Now, just before we started recording, you said that you're going to be in the UK soon because you're going to be doing a very exciting tour. So tell us about the support slot that you're going to be doing and when do rehearsals start for that?
Sure. So I'll be over in the UK with Phair, who I've been playing bass for many years now, and we'll be opening for Alanis Morissette throughout the UK. We're going to be rehearsing in Dublin, which is where our first show of that tour is at. I'm not sure where exactly it is. Sometime in the middle of June, we'll be starting rehearsals, and that show is the mid-20s of June. I'm not sure the exact date, but let's say the 23rd.
And when it comes to support slots, how do you feel differently to when you've played your own or when you've been involved with gigs that have been arenas where you've been the headline slot? Does it feel less pressure, or do you feel you have a certain role to fill? Like, what's it like doing a support slot in an arena?
Yeah, yes to both. Anecdotally, I have said, I don't think this is always true, but I have said that the support slot can be the best slot on a tour. Significantly less pressure, certainly, but you're playing less time earlier in the night. You aren't getting off stage at 11 p.m. and exhausted after 2 or 3 hours. It can be, depending on what you're looking to get out of a tour as a musician or as a part of the tour, it can certainly be the best spot on the tour, at least with stress levels, in that it's significantly lower than the headlining slot.
And is that just because of expectation, or is that anything else? And also, is there how does your whole day work differently? So I guess do you get to have more fun in the evenings, or is it back to the hotel like early? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, it can be all of the above. So looking at the sound check schedule, at least for like a run of day, sound check schedules are usually inverse to the run of show. So say you have 3 artists on the bill, first, second, third being headline, would be inverse of that for showtime or for sound check. So third, second, first. With the first opening slot being the last artist to sound check. So that can be a much more truncated day if you're sound checking, let's say, from 5 to 5:30, doors are at 6, and you play from, say, 7 to 7:30. That your whole span of work is essentially 2.5, 3 hours. In regards to what the extracurriculars can look like from a support slot, it really kind of depends on how the tour is run from both the artist and the tour manager, how the travel schedule works, if you're traveling night of or the following morning, or flying versus busing. Generally speaking, it's a lot more free time. If club tours tend to be more in downtown areas than arena tours, just because the space needed to build and support an arena, it's not usually in the the epicenter of a downtown area, whereas a 2,000 person capacity club can be. So getting around from an arena can be a little bit more difficult. It's a lot more calling cars to come get you if you want to go out to dinner or whatever. But it's usually, in my experience, it's been a free night after the set most nights.
Amazing. And Does it work that the scale of the show, given that it's arenas, make you feel more relaxed or less relaxed than the smaller club shows? Because I remember speaking to a friend of mine who was playing in arenas, and then he played a little gig in my lounge, actually, to like about 6 people, and he said that was actually more scary because I felt more exposed and could see the whites of people's eyes, which blew my mind when he was used to playing to 20,000 people. So what's the dynamic for you?
Yeah, same. I can completely agree with that sentiment. There's a lot less intimacy inherent in bigger venue shows, arenas, and up. There's so much distance. There's rarely less than at least 10 to 20 feet between you and the front row, depending on the stage setup and just the setup of the production. But yeah, it's a lot more of a void that you're playing to. Once the lights get involved, once all the audio sounds, the whole show is going, it can be not surreal but almost dreamlike in a way in the bigger venues, that there's just such a disconnect between what I'm experiencing on stage versus what someone in the crowd would be experiencing, that there is very little common ground. Whereas in a smaller show, whether it's in your living room or just in a club or whatever, you're kind of part of it. It's all kind of melded together. The crowd and the stage is maybe just a barricade, and that's kind of it, or just the stage itself. So it's a lot more intermingled than the experiences within.
So when it comes to that tour, and you said you might only get half an hour sound check, like that might not be the case, but let's say your kind of sound check is squeezed and things are a little bit rushed. What are the key things that Ben Sturley needs to be in place from a sound check point of view to you walk on stage an hour or two later and go, I'm ready and I feel confident in regards to what I need to perform at my best?
With playing with Liz specifically, but I guess this is probably true with most artists, being able to clearly enough hear the vocal and at least aspects of the drums, depending on what kind of, if it's an in-ear mix, it's a little bit more able to be pre-dialed in that we can dial mixes in during rehearsals. So a 30-minute sound check is probably fine, and it's more about getting familiar and comfortable with the stage setup, and how we can kind of interact within this specific venue. But generally speaking, as far as just what my needs are in order to perform well, it's vocal and hearing enough drums to be able to lock. Of course, being able to hear everything perfectly clearly, just like the record, is ideal, but it's not super realistic. So I'm happy if I can. If I can hear vocal and enough of the rest of the band.
And talk about interacting on stage there, which is an interesting point. What works in regards to on-stage communication? I mean, do you have a technical way of doing it? Because I know some artists can press a pedal and talk to each other through, or are you having to do it through facial expressions and that type of thing?
If there isn't a talkback setup, and I should clarify, a talkback mic would be a mic either individually or just available on stage that via like a button on the floor, or like a what's the word? Basically a pedal on the floor that engages the microphone, that we can all communicate with one another in our ears. If that isn't available, I haven't been in many situations, and knock on wood, that excessive communication is something that's really sought after by anyone on stage, unless there's like a train wreck like coming, we don't want to interrupt like the good vibes, especially if it's going to be difficult to communicate. And without a talkback, anything specific can be extremely difficult to communicate. So I want to say like as little as possible, but as musically as possible, and not like human interaction forward, certainly, but if there's a talkback there, then yeah, sure, we can yell out to each other whatever's needed.
You're used to playing big arenas for lots of different artists, but obviously you worked with Selena Gomez. Now, Selena Gomez, for listeners who won't know, I'm sure they bloody well know who she is. I think she's like the second most followed person on Instagram behind Ronaldo, which is a footballer.
Sure.
And the scale of that is just so enormous. And you've stood a few meters away from that spotlight. And we will have listeners, and there'll be people all over the world who are emerging artists who would want to get into that spotlight. What's the reality like from your perspective? And do you think there's anything the music industry could do more of or less of to support artists in that level of that level of intensity of spotlight?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's, from what I've seen of that type of success and that type of career, it's no joke, man. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work to find yourself there in the first place, to maintain it, and to do what's asked of I think most people who find themselves in that position. And I have a lot of respect for those who can withstand the heat of that kind of spotlight. Working with Selena was really wonderful. And to the Instagram note, if I'm not mistaken, the time that I was most active with her, which was during the revival era tours, she was the most followed person on
Wow.
Instagram. So it was something that, at least looking back, is like, wow, that was crazy to be a fly on the wall in that in her orbit, certainly. And she's a wonderful person. It was a wonderful boss and all that stuff. As far as what's maybe necessary for people aspiring to that, I mean, man, it's hard work. And if it may look easy at times or whatever, it is, from what I can tell, it's not easy. It is not at all. I definitely admire those who are able to find their way into that spotlight and retain such poise as Selena has been able to do.
And do you think the music industry could do more or less to support people in that situation? Because the phrase you just used there was the heat, and obviously the heat comes with kind of the press and being tracked everywhere she goes. And I remember, Ben, and I think this is interesting perspective for a lot of listeners. I was once walking out of a venue next to a singer of a well-known band, and I'd walked in and out of this door all day. And this was 3 hours after they played an arena show. And it completely shocked me. It was like a really interesting thing to experience that from that perspective. Was just walk through these doors, and there was 3 rows of people screaming Beatlemania levels of hysteria. And it really freaked me out. I was like, wow, that must be kind of really flattering for a very short period of time. But otherwise, that's unhealthy. Like, that's not good for the human being to experience that. And it really freaked me out. And it was so interesting. So you must have, I'm guessing you saw a lot of that everywhere you went on tour.
Yeah.
Like how would you advise someone best to deal with that, given that you've had some perspective?
Sometimes it was a little, I want to say alarming, but yeah, alarming. It's a lot of excitement from a lot of people in one place. Anecdotally, I remember we were in the the Philippines, and coming off the plane, going through immigration, and I was kind of in the A circle at that point. So I was moving around with Selena and security and stuff. And I was shocked to see the Beatlemania you just kind of described there was absolutely happening all throughout the Manila airport. But also the customs guards and the security people of the airport and the police escorts and stuff, they were doing the same thing. They were trying to get pictures. They were acting much more in accordance with what the fans were doing than like the security or positions of authority that they were supposed to represent, which were like, that to me was like, oh my gosh, this is insane. I think the landscape of of say fame, to use a singular word, is changing a bit in maybe a post-COVID era, or at least a in the TikTok era in which we currently live. I think there are a lot of developing avenues for which people and artists and musicians to get maybe different forms of recognition that can excel and start their career that maybe aren't exactly the more historical routes that pop artists have gone through the machine, as it were. I think there's a changing of the tides of what's possible as artists to find their place in the world. Popularity and I guess, yeah, just popularity throughout people included in that too. I'm not honestly sure that the that the process that someone like Selena or like a Taylor Swift or something like that went through is going to continue to be something that we'll see in future generations. I'm really kind of curious to see how the democratization of fame that has kind of come through social media affects what does popularity and fame look like in 5 years, you know.
Really interesting answer. Really interesting. And when you got that gig, how did your day-to-day life change, even consciously or subconsciously? Like, were there little things like, I don't know, all of a sudden you got more Instagram notifications and, you know, inbound stuff and people trying to hack your Instagram and all that type of thing that sometimes comes with that level of like that like things must have changed for you, right?
A bit. Maybe less than you think. Maybe more. It's tough. It's tough to kind of quantify what changed because at least in the time since I started or since I first kind of got that call, um, everything's changed in a way. But like I feel like that would have happened regardless of if I got that call, and that was the natural progression of what my career,
Nice.
the direction my career was headed at that point. For a little bit of a to put in the time and place, the first call I got to play with her at least was in 2015, and that was only 1 year after I moved to Los Angeles. So I think that is more of maybe the discussion point here than the call itself, in that looking back, I was very young in the city in which I now, you know, and have since called home, but I was new to the city, and getting a gig of that scale is a big deal, especially for how young and new and green I was to the city. So it was really very exciting. Don't get me wrong; like it was really really cool, and the whole everything about it was you know a wonderful experience. But I think the yeah, like that a call like that would have made a little bit more sense a few, maybe a handful more than a few years into living in a place like LA. Don't get me wrong, I'm very happy for it to have happened when it happened, all that stuff. But yeah, it was early on, man.
And I'm sure a lot of bass players weren't so happy who'd been there a long time.
That's the yeah, that's the unwritten part there.
That's the flip side of it. And your role within that setup, you were band leader, is that right?
On the road for the touring part, yeah, and that's the not music director necessarily, but essentially kind of making sure.
So what is the band leader? So can you define that? What's the difference between a music?
Sure, essentially making sure the integrity and the consistency of the show maintained while we're on the road, and the music director is not, you know, traveling with us and not easily accessible. There were a couple songs that may have showed up like halfway through the tour that it would kind of fall on my shoulders to make sure Selena and the band were rehearsed on them if we were just kind of integrating them during sound checks or something like that. So essentially keeping the ship afloat as much as possible, and maintaining communication between different departments to keep the show kind of moving as intended.
And that's such an interesting dynamic, and you don't have to give, you know, necessary direct examples, but we're working with Selena. But in that situation, where does I don't want to use the word power, but kind of where does the decision-making authority lie in that relationship between the artist? Like, is your role there to realize her ambition or her vision, or is it a case that you can give her feedback and say, actually, we want to do this slightly differently to make it more like the records? Like, so how do you, because that's quite a nerve-wracking position to be in, particularly with someone of that level of fame. So if you know, a young artist was in that situation in future, either a band leader or musical director working with a really high-profile person, it feels trepidatious just hearing you talk about it. Did it feel trepidatious?
No, not really. I mean, with her and really with every artist I've worked with, and with every kind of, for lack of a better term, support position, but being a side musician, all that, it's all in service to the artist and their vision. You know, I've never really tried to instill what I think is creatively best in a situation like that. Like, it's not my show. No one's paying tickets to come see. Like, my opinion doesn't really matter, man. I'm here to facilitate and to help, you know, make sure the artist's vision is seen through as best as possible. You know, it's different when we start looking at film stuff, and where I'm in more of a directly creative role. But as a hired musician, it is all about the artist perspective, the artist's goals, the artist's vision, and how I can be in service to that. And in the band leader role specifically, a lot of that really was communication, and is communication and facilitation, and how can we make what the artist wants. How can we make this happen? What do we have to do in lights? What do we have to do with production? What do we have to do with the stage? What do we have to do with choreography? What do we have to do with the band? And those conversations, the details, maybe aren't as visible to an artist in that situation because they don't need to be. Artist wants this, and here are the details that the different departments have to figure out in order to make it happen.
And so you're speaking to lots of different. So it's not just leading the band and the actual musicians on stage. You need to coordinate it with choreographers and with lighting people, and that's. Wow, so interesting. So it's a lot.
As needed, and every situation is different. Yeah. It's not an all hands on deck for every situation imaginable necessarily. There's certainly stuff that I'm sure I wasn't aware of that I didn't need to be. But it's a team effort. It takes a village, all that.
And love it. With shows like Saturday Night Live and Jimmy Fallon Show, did that feel any more intense than any other show, or you seem like quite a laid back dude, but was there any part of you which was like, no, this is a different level now?
SNL, definitely.
Tell us about that whole day and that. Tell us about your experience.
3 days.
3 days. Okay, wow.
Yeah. So the band gets there on Thursday. We started rehearsing. We had done like a week of rehearsals in LA prior. And at this point, I had done a bunch of TV shows, Fallon a couple times, I think, at that point, Ellen, all that stuff. But the vibe, the energy, the stress with it being live was significantly more intense for the 3 days that I was kind of in and out of that studio. And just like the lore and the history of that studio and what has happened there made it that much heavier. It was crazy. It was really, really cool. This was in 2016 wintertime. That was in the middle of some blizzard, storm, to where all of Manhattan, or at least the part of Manhattan that we were in, had gotten shut down. Like the roads had been shut down on Saturday. Like I think midday, I remember being part of conversations that were talking about transportation logistics, which is something that normally didn't cross my whatever. It was more just here's a email, show up at this place and someone will pick you up kind of thing. But there was kind of an all hands on deck. Like we need to figure this out because the city is shut down, coordinating with like police escorts, stuff like that. That was wild to just, again, be a fly on the wall for. But then the performance and the show itself was, fantastic. Like it was so cool. It was so cool. I can't understate how cool being in that atmosphere and being able to perform on that show was. Like definitely a career highlight. That has stuck with me since, and I couldn't be like more stoked that I got to experience it.
How did you get out of your own head in regards to performance? So I guess so like within, let's say it's an ad break, and it's like, okay, so we get back from ad break, the host is now going to introduce us. Who was hosting actually? Can you remember?
Ronda Rousey, the boxer.
Oh yeah, right, okay. So Ronda Rousey is going to introduce you. What are you thinking in those few minutes? Because it's going out live and it's going to be recorded, and people are going to watch this in 10 years' time, whether it's great or terrible. People are going to watch it. So
they're going to watch it more if it's terrible.
Exactly, right? So what are you thinking?
Well, to add a little bit more stress and pressure on it, one of the songs that we did, it was the second song, was the song of hers called Hands to Myself, which starts with a bass solo. Essentially, nice. It's an 808 solo, but so it's all right, announce, and then it's like just me. So it's kind of terrifying, but if I recall, and I think this has stuck with me since then, just resting on and relying and trusting on my experience that led up to that. At that point, I'd been playing for, God, it's hard to I don't even know anymore. Maybe almost 20 years at that point. Like I started very young. I wasn't 30 yet when I played SNL, but I started playing when I was 7 or 8. So being able to trust it, like, hey, like I've been doing this for a long time, maybe certainly not at this scale yet, but I'd been doing, I guess, the right enough things to get me here in the first place. So, tune it out, muscle memory, it'll be fine. And it got me through. It was fine,
Tune it out, muscle memory. That's good advice. Okay, so let's look earlier in your career. If you could relive a 6-month period between the ages of 1 and 20, what would it be and why?
I'm originally from Detroit, Michigan. Between leaving Detroit and ending up in LA, I traveled a lot. I had been doing a lot of van and trailer touring for the years leading up to leaving Detroit with a band of mine that I spent a lot of time with. Uh, but I had hopped on cruise ships intermittently in my early 20s as a way to travel, get some new musical experiences, and make a little bit of money. And the period of time between leaving Detroit, leaving the band I had been playing in, and moving here, I did a combination of hopping on a ship for like 3 months or so, and then traveling around Southeast Asia for like 4 months with a little bit of money in a backpack. So that period of time was, in hindsight, really formative. I was probably like 24, 25 during it all. That period of time was really fun and really formative, and I experienced and grew a lot with and in the world. I think I'd like to think, um, and I'd love to, hang out there for another 6 months, maybe not that, maybe just go visit that time of life for a few days or so. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. I got to see a lot, got to meet a lot, got to do a lot at like the right time to do it at that age.
And if you would then go from that age onwards to now, certainly in a professional period, what would be the 6-month period you'd relive?
Yeah, a lot of the Selena tour, especially the overseas stuff, was cool.
There's something about overseas that you like.
Yeah. I definitely prefer touring internationally to the States. The things with the States, I've done it a lot with a lot of different people, a lot of different times. Not to say this country doesn't have it can be a beautiful country, but it's just, I've done it a lot. There's very little that's new and exotic and interesting. That's part of why I'm doing this, like, why not? I want to do this because I want to see the world. I don't really care to see Ohio again. So yeah, the 6-month period or any 6-month period in the heavy activity Selena stuff is probably a good time. But really, I mean, you can kind of pick any 6-month region in the last, let's say, 10 years of my life, and I'm there's something to be excited about in a lot of it.
Really interesting. And that's what an answer, basically any point in the last 10 years. I mean, that sounds like you're living the dream. What do you think is an underrated skill or quality that you think every musician should have that is beyond
people skills?
Beyond just technically being able to play your instrument?
Yeah, it's the hangman. That's it. Of course, I think you got to be a great musician to do this and at any serious level. You have to be a great musician, but that's a given. There are a lot of great musicians, millions, dare I say, of great musicians throughout the world. People skills, soft skills. Being a person that other people want to be around, and conversely, like, I want to hang out with other people I like. Like, I don't like being around people that are maybe not pleasant to be around in one capacity or other. So it's a two-way street. So yeah, just being like a good, enjoyable presence in pretty much any capacity, especially with touring. You got to live on a bus with up to 11 other people in very confined quarters. Like, that doesn't work or go well if you're not pleasant and everyone around the situation isn't at least some degree of like pleasant and enjoyable to be around. There's this Alice Cooper quote that has stuck with me for many years, and I think he outlines this in there's this like documentary from 10 years ago called Hired Gun. That's uh says that, listen, like, when he's talking about finding a band for him as an artist, talking about, first off, you have to play the songs perfectly, no question about it. Sure, okay, there's, let's say, 1 million people who can play all Alice Cooper songs perfectly on whatever their instrument is. Then they have to do it every single night without fail. So that cuts that million down to, let's say, 500,000. Then they have to look good while doing it. That 500,000 now becomes 10, 20, 30,000. I'm making up numbers here, so don't quote me on these. Now you have to look good, play it perfectly, and play it perfectly every night, sound good, the whole thing. Now you also have to be a pleasant person for, in this case, Alice Cooper to hang out with on the bus every day for months on end. It's like, 2 people, 3 people, 4 people, you know, like the list gets a lot smaller every step of the way. But that's really like the most important part is just being pleasant, man. It's
So
a
how
big
does
part
that
of
come
it.
across in auditions, right? So how, you're obviously, you can tell, very personable and very likable. And, when you got that call for the Selena gig or other big gigs that you've done, beyond showing what you can do with your instruments, how are you demonstrating that?
Mhm.
Is it through your emails? Is it through your comms? Like these are all really important elements to show that
Yeah,
you're in that too, rather than the other 30,000.
sure. I think I'd like to hope at least it's something that comes across kind of intrinsically just in how I present myself and even a few minutes chatting or whatever, the impression is made that like, okay, this guy's all right, you know. Uh, but in regards to auditions, if I'm honest, I haven't had to audition for a not small amount of the artist stuff. I've of course done a lot of auditions, but I didn't audition for Selena. When I was doing playing with Noah Cyrus soon after that, and same with Liz. I didn't audition for anyone. Um, I did with Rachel Platten, who I spent a lot of time with in like 2017, 2018. Fight Song is kind of one of her big hits. Um, but a lot of the opportunities that came my way were more friendship and recommendation based than auditioning and proving myself based, which I'm fortunate for in a way, but I think it just kind of speaks more to the importance of the personality aspect, because not only is it necessary to survive in a gig, but I think it also can open doors through the community in which we exist, in that we can all kind of help each other out as friends within the musician community, which sometimes means kind of bypassing the audition process, which can be tedious for everyone involved, I think.
Who's useful to know, not necessarily the personal, the individuals, but in that situation, every musician. I know so many I work with so many young musicians who are just desperate to know how to get those types of gigs. Obviously, those relationships would have been organic, but like, who are good people to get to know? What are the roles that are they doing in those big gigs?
I think it's a little bit more about the broader community, at least here in LA, and I can really only speak to that. There's a pretty extended and welcoming and cool and friendly community of musicians in general, that anything from name an instrument to administrative to production to arrangement to everything that touches the music going into a live show or into a tour. Um, that I feel like all exists in a social way too here. That doesn't necessarily include the job hunting, job seeking, gig looking for. That just kind of forgets all that. It's just like, hey, we are just a bunch of people with similar interests, similar passions, like and have done similar things. It's no surprise that we're also all friends in a big way, without putting too much pressure on, or even like kind of considering like, so and so here does this, and maybe this I can whatever get this gig or whatever. I don't see too much of that being pushed forward in my circles. I just, in so many ways, I just like hanging out with my friends who are also musicians doing cool stuff, and it has happened historically that like I've been able to say, hey, my friend and my other friend over here are doing these things, and like maybe could meet in the middle and work together on a thing. And I've also found myself on the receiving end of that too. Now, to be a little bit more, I guess, specific, generally speaking, the music director role is a role that hires musicians and gets people sorted for tours and all that stuff. That said, every situation can be different. I've gotten calls from managers. I've gotten calls from playback guys. It's gone the whole kind of length of the gamut. And I really do think the most important aspect, if someone wants to be touring stuff, is hang out where the touring people hang out. See what is going on in your city community wise with people who are doing more and better, and certainly the stuff that you or any person looking to achieve that wants to be doing. It's where the other people that are doing this hanging out.
Nice.
Let me see if I get along with them.
Yeah, nice. One of the you might answer this question by the fact that you've got such a portfolio career, and we're going to get onto the writing for film scores in a moment, and this might be the answer to the question. But how do you deal with being a freelancer, not knowing what your next gig could be, and the uncertainty? Like every freelancer in every industry I speak to, whether it's music or anywhere else, it's just there's a point where they always go, oh my God, like what if I throw myself forward in a year and I've not got any gigs, and how am I going to pay my mortgage and how am I going to pay my bills and stuff like that? How do you best navigate that with having the great life of being a freelancer and the career that you have?
Diversity of clients is incredibly important. I'm very lucky that I come from a very entrepreneurial family. My dad started a small business when he was in his mid-20s. He still runs it to this day. My family kind of runs it, but it's 4 or 5 or 6 or sometimes 7 employees, depending on how busy they are. And it's a creative business in artistic custom glass, mostly residential, some commercial. So I grew up in an environment where I saw my dad struggle as not a freelancer, but as an entrepreneur and as a small business owner, and saw what it took to just make it work, which has greatly influenced.
What was that? What made it work? What did you do?
I mean, diversity of clients, a really heavy work ethic, and I translate that to what I do now is I'm not ever, or rarely have I ever been exclusively reliant on one gig, one project, one situation, to where if I did lose it for any reason, then I would be in a bad situation. I was able to and continue to be acutely aware of where I'm spreading myself and kind of how widely, with the intention of, for lack of a better term, hedging my bets against whatever uproar this industry may throw at me at any point. I think that's really important in order to maintain some semblance of stability, is to have a lot of different things going at any given time.
And what does that look like for you? Is that so obviously you do the writing for lots of different clients in that way, as well as the bass playing. Is there anything else you do beyond that you'd happily share?
It's really mostly writing and bass playing. That's certainly, between the two of them, that's 98% of it. But I'm always happy to help out with anything kind of audio adjacent, anything production adjacent, whatever. But I think it comes more along the lines of diversifying within the things you want to do. Yeah. So like I've been playing with Liz Phair for 7 years, something like that now. But I still play with other artists, so like if Liz were to, and she does, maybe like last year, 2024 calendar year, we played one show, so that wasn't a big part of my year last year in any way, shape or form. But I scored a bunch of different projects last year that were all with different clients. So over the course of the year, I was really quite busy, but none of that really was reliant on Liz or that gig or anything like that. Whereas this year might look a little bit different. Last year I had a few films. This year I don't have any until the end of the year, it's looking like. So there's always kind of this juggle of different projects, different clients, different et cetera. But I think kind of maintaining them independently from a business perspective is really important.
So if you're on a tour that ends, I don't know, between Christmas or say the New Year and June, whilst you're on tour, are you consciously thinking about, I mean, maybe that money would tie you over until the next year anyway, but let's say, it doesn't. Are you consciously working on your kind of pipeline and like reaching out to people to say I'm available, or is it all inbound for you?
Yeah, no, it's kind of always. I'm always maintaining every aspect, kind of situationally and time-wise dependent. But yeah, I'm always kind of working every little part of my whole career in business as much as possible, and as much as is appropriate for the time. A good example would be so I'm doing this UK tour in June and July, but I'm going to be in the UK a little bit early, and I have some companies that I work with on the ad music side of things in London. So I'm going to be meeting them because I've only been working with them via email or Zoom or whatever for however long I've been working with them. So I'm able to kind of parlay one thing into the next and retain these or strengthen these relationships that I've been reliant on, at least as a small aspect of my career, for however long, depending on the client.
One of the things you did last year was with Weezer.
Yeah.
It's a cool project. Tell us about this. What was the brief?
Really cool project. So my buddy Max is their music director, has been for a while, and I'm a huge Weezer fan. Like, they were, man, Pinkerton, Blue Album, and Maladroit, however you want to pronounce it, also an unsung hero of their discography. But I've seen Weezer a bunch, like as a kid. You know, I was 14 years old. Remember, like, really loving this Weezer concert. Yeah, my buddy who works with them just gave me a call one day. He's like, "Hey man, I need a show intro, like the intro music that they will walk on stage for this European tour they did last summer and fall with the Smashing Pumpkins." And the brief was something orchestral that leads into "My Name Is Jonas." And he had kind of mocked up a thing like, here's some ideas, whatever. It wasn't like a full production, just like a sketch, a sandboxing kind of thing. So I took that and ran with it, and it was a really tight turnaround. If I'm not mistaken, it was a 24-hour turnaround kind of thing, which is pretty nuts. It's like a minute and a half or 2 minutes. But I was luckily able to say, I got the text at 7 a.m. or something. I'm an early riser myself, so I was able to say, yeah, I'm on it. I'll update you at the end of the day and give you where I'm at tomorrow morning or whatever. And it all worked out. It was a really cool piece. It immediately got approved by Rivers, which was a cool little thing to kind of hear. Just kind of knowing the weight that he can kind of carry around, and the big stick that he carries around. So it was really cool to kind of get that immediate seal of approval. And within like a week or two, if I'm not mistaken, they were using it live.
Wow. That's super
cool.
That's so cool. Now tell us about, you worked with Booker T.
Yeah.
That's a big deal, man. That is the...
No, it was cool. It was cool. They did it. I will say I didn't do a ton with him, and it was a good time. He's a good dude. His son's a cool guy. But I also said, hey, can I recommend a drummer? I see you're looking for a rhythm section. I've always found that if I have a connection pre-existing with a drummer, it goes a lot better. Just everything. So I called my buddy who is a dear friend and has been a dear friend. I tour with him all the time. He's Liz's drummer, and many other people's drummers. I'm like, hey, you wanna go out for Booker T? And we did audition for this. This was one of the audition ones. So me and him, jammed on Green Onions and Time Is Tight and whatever else. And we went and met Booker, and I ended up playing with him for a handful of months there, and then some scheduling stuff at the time. I think it was right around the time I got Noah Cyrus too. Some scheduling stuff kind of took me out of that situation pretty quickly. But my drummer buddy ended up playing with him for like the next 3 years or something like that. So it was really cool. I wish I would have been able to do more with him. It was a really, really cool situation.
What makes him unique to work with? You worked with him for 3 months or so, a few months. Tell us about the interactions and what made him special.
I mean, there's wisdom just kind of oozing out of him. He's a legend. He's been around forever, and there's a certain truth both in his playing, but in his approach to playing, his approach to dealing with people he's playing with, that kind of transcends almost the words that he's speaking. Like he's not a talky dude. He says what he means what he says, and doesn't say too much. And there was a lot of, I feel like, just wisdom that I was able to just soak in by being in his aura, by being in the same room as him. For the time that I was, that was cool. And it was similar to what SNL kind of did. It was a little bit of a validation of like, hey man, you're doing something right if you're in this room. You're doing something right if you're hanging out with this guy. I got to record with his son on some stuff and him, and it was a really wonderful experience from which I was able to subconsciously and beyond take a lot of his wisdom.
Big question coming up. When you were growing up as an artist playing, your early gigs, who were you seeking validation from, if you're honest? And who do you seek validation from today? Like, is there anyone that you think, oh, I want them to think it's good, or beyond just the artist you're working for?
Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, I don't know if it's necessarily validation, but I'm lucky to have grown up with really supportive parents. As I mentioned, they're very entrepreneurial and creative as well, which is a nice little cross section of traits. Uh, but the support that I got from my parents, especially my dad, really both my parents, was incredibly instrumental in pursuing what I've pursued as strongly as I've pursued it. And there probably still are, if I'm honest, but there certainly were that I remember times in which my dad would propose to me like, hey, why can't you be the best? Or why can't, like, what's stopping you from doing exactly what you want to do at the highest level or whatever level you see fit? Like, honestly, what is standing between you and that? And kind of challenge me on it. With the intention of motivating me. And I think to realize that, like, really there's not, except for maybe yourself, standing between you and what you want to do in a lot of ways. I think the power of working really hard can go a very long way. So I don't know if it's validation from them, but I think like accepting the challenge in a way that was instilled in me from my parents of like, hey man, like, why can't you go do it? So I think a lot of that is what motivated my early days and continues to motivate in a way too. But as far as today, where I seek validation from outside of just like the client doing the job, really myself. Like I've developed incredibly high standards for myself over the years. I don't ever send out anything for review that I can't completely back. I don't send out demos or anything like that. I send out things as close to finished as they can possibly be, as close to complete, as close to my full vision of what I'm hired for to bring to the table as where they can be. And I am always pushing myself to get better. I'm always teaching myself about new stuff. I'm always trying to be on the cutting edge of anything and everything as it pertains to what I do day in, day out. So I think currently, like today and for the last handful of years, the biggest I guess validator has been, or the biggest bar has been self-imposed.
That's so interesting and quite sophisticated from your dad in that, that's obviously a few years ago, and a big industry that's really thriving at the moment is this idea of having a one-to-one coach and coaching. And I do actually a bit of this away from the podcast. And Emma Hayes, who is the USA women's national football coach who just won the gold medal at the Olympics, so absolute top of her game, says, I can't do this without a coach. Basically, I need a coach. And one of the main, and I'm sure you probably know this and many listeners will, but if they don't, one of the main kind of ideas of a coach is that you identify where someone is today and where their potential is, and then identify all the hurdles that exist and then how you can overcome each of them. And what we find is, it's an interesting book in the room just behind me, which has this idea that the greatest hurdle that we have are our own assumptions holding us back, which is exactly what you just said there, what your dad was saying 2 years ago. And often we have these assumptions, which are, I'm not good enough, I'm not experienced enough, I'm not this, I haven't been in LA long enough to get this gig, that type of thing, which actually these are just assumptions that we can have that can hold us back. So that's amazing. Your dad was kind of coaching you either consciously or subconsciously that time, and that allowed you to do that. In regards to, let's move into the area of your writing and your composing. You obviously do a lot of stuff for film, and you did a very kind of credible piece around Seaspiracy, which was quite a well-known documentary a few years ago that won a lot of awards and got a lot of traction for the message it was sending. When you're writing pieces, how often will you, if you're getting towards the end, if your process is, I will only send out something that I think is the end of my vision, how often does someone come back and go, that's not what we're after. It's great, but it's not what we're after. And then you have to undo all of that. Because it was Tarantino who once said, and I think you probably heard him say this quote before, but Tarantino that once said the reason for a lot of the times in his early films he never got someone to write for his films is he said, I didn't want someone else to have more control over me than I did over my own films, right? Sure. So you have a lot of power at your fingertips there. So tell us about that relationship of when it comes to writing.
Yeah, I guess I will say with more long-form stuff like film and TV, I'm not like withholding the entire film until I'm done or anything like that before I give a first look. It's broken up into cues and reels and acts and whatever. So yeah, I've never been in a situation where like, hey, here's the film, and they say, oh, that's not it, start over,
Okay, fair
step
enough.
one. So not quite that. But I've had plenty of situations where I'll throw over this idea and it gets kicked back or gets modified significantly or whatever. The best thing to kind of prevent against it is having as much open, clear, and honest communication prior to working, getting the brief, essentially, whatever that however that may show itself in a, here's a written brief or here's a hour-long conversation about the script or whatever. Having as much of an open dialogue as possible, I think, is really important. Jury's out in this, and composers, I think, take one of two lanes on this, but I think temp music is great. Most directors, most creatives I find myself working with that aren't musically inclined, art composers, aren't musicians, I don't want to talk music with them. I want to talk the function, the purpose, the intention of the music, which ends up being an emotional conversation with perspective and with plot points and with character arcs and with these things that, like, that's the point of the music, is to enhance these, to strengthen these, to help tell these stories, etc. It's not about the genre of music. It's not about the instrumentation. It's not about the specifics, really. If a director has thoughts about that, I'm of course happy to hear them, but it's not where I want to go necessarily. So I think having as much of an honest conversation about the function, intent, and purpose of the music, and utilize temp music. We really love the name a score. We really love this vibe in our emotional scenes. We love this for our action stuff. Finding out what works with that, but also utilizing that too. So I think a lot of communication and using other resources prior to getting to work really staves off a lot of miscommunications down the line.
Yeah, that's such a key point. When it comes to, so I'm going to ask a really naive question here. I presume the music goes on last, right? And the reason I'm making that presumption, which you might correct me on, is that if you write the score to the script, what you've been sent, so it's all synchronized, and then the film gets edited even just by one beat, then your music is going to be right. It's going to all be out, right? So is it this constant like back and forth, like a game of tennis of like, oh, we've made another edit. Can you change this? Can you change? And that must be a nightmare to work with, right?
Yeah. I mean, it happens. Nothing's locked until it's locked, and then even then, it's not really locked. It's part of the process. It didn't used to be as fluid when editing technology was not as quick and immediate as it is today. But it's part of the process. I set up every project in a way that is able to adapt with changes, whether they be directional changes, brief changes, creative changes, edit changes, whatever. And I expect that to be, to one extent or another, be part of the process. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's hard, but it's already plugged into my workflow. Like, it doesn't really change anything for me. If we need to subtract 5 frames from this, that's fine. I can do it in 10 minutes. No big deal.
I'll ask this question and you answer in a generic way, because I think it's important that we don't like give clear examples of this. But if you're a musician who's doing this and someone keeps sending stuff back, are you charging an hourly rate for that or a day rate? Or like, at what point do you go, hang on, I agree to do this amount of work. You're kind of someone who's a bit of a perfectionist and wants to keep changing things. This is now taking me 3 more days than I would have planned for. How do you work with that conversation?
Yeah, honestly, man, I don't cap revisions. I don't put a time limit on anything at all. I do what is needed to get done in order to make the artist, client, project, etc. happy. That's my job. I don't do this for money.
Yeah, fair enough.
I mean, I do. I make a living doing this, so it's like, it's a necessary thing. But like, that's never been my motivation in doing this. My motivation is my kind of lifestyle and freedom that comes with this. So whatever's needed to get done, and so much more. I think yes, that does happen, but the question becomes not how can I prevent this from happening in the future. It's more like, what kind of projects can I work on that, even if it does happen through this, that like it's going to be worth it, like creatively going to be worth it, that the projects are cool enough that like, yeah, let's spend, a week dialing in a frame by frame difference or whatever. Like, yeah, that's fine. Let's make it awesome. And seeking out projects that allow for awesomeness in whatever capacity, even if it's more trying to get there than I initially anticipated. Like, I'm down for the project, you know. I don't cap revisions. I just want to get it right.
And if you wanted someone to hear a piece of music that you're really proud of, like what's one piece of music that you'd say that's what I showed someone?
I mean, currently available and released. There's a lot fewer, I guess, available, a lot less available of that than what I'm working on all the time. You know, I really like the score I did to Nothing But a Good Time, which is a documentary series on it recently came out on Paramount, directed by Jeff Tremaine. It's a little bit of a left fielder in that it's a documentary about the history of hair metal and the 80s LA rock scene, and the music and the score is very much reflective of that. Like, it's very much I tried to make a window into that time period in so many ways, and I hired some great musicians, great friends. So as far as music that I've done that is a part of a release project, certainly that. But as far as standalone music, there's a track on the Seaspiracy album. I think it's the last track. It's called Redemption. That I always thought was really nice. I always really liked, and over time I've continued to enjoy it. Another one on that album is a track called Spy Cameras. So really like that one. Pretty much anything I've like released under my own name, I'm pretty proud of. You know, I don't really just throw out whatever. There's another film that soundtrack is released, but I'm going to be scoring a different variation of that project. I think this year or next year, called Grafton. And that was a really cool kind of Bernard Herrmann inspired like modern noir thing, or a modern take on a noir score.
So that's quite a lot of different genre, as you say, genres or styles that you're leaning into.
Yeah. It's part of it, you know. Be at least in a way, be a chameleon of sorts.
Nice.
There's certainly things I gravitate towards over others, but I think having the ability to be flexible and true to different genre styles as much as possible is important.
Nice. We're going to begin to wrap up. One of the questions I do have for you, though, is what change do you think needs to happen in the music industry? If you could, you know, be president of the music industry for one day and you could create an executive order, what would the executive order do?
Audit rights holding.
Tell me more.
It's probably the biggest thing. What I've seen in my time, and I think is true for a lot of people creating, is the status quo of rights ownership and thus ability to collect percentages of what residual and royalty income may come from these is there's a competitive aspect to that. I found a lot of composers, a lot of artists in situations where there are people who, and there are entities, companies, labels, whatever, whose big business model is to grab a lot of ownership and claims to rights of back-end monies from music that they had maybe a less balanced part in promoting or getting out there or monetizing or whatever. So I think it's important for artists to be very conscious of what they're signing, especially when it pertains to ownership and rights. I think there's a lot of ways to kind of get screwed over if you're not careful about that, in ways that you can't, you know, help but know or do anything about, except for at the moment that you sign something or don't sign something. So I think that's really important for a lot of artists to be educated about and know what they're signing, know what they're getting into, know what's going where and what the different allocations of X, Y, and Z can be, and whether or not they're doing them for the right reasons or signing up for a good thing when they sign stuff away.
You've given loads of great advice today. What's the best bit of advice someone's ever given you?
Ooh. I'm going to go back to my dad on that one, I think. Again, I'm not sure if it's classified as advice, but throughout my entire life, I've always thought, like, well, why can't I? You know, like, posed to me as a question to solving a problem I want to solve. Like, why can't I solve this? What's stopping me from, getting from here to here, doing this instead of this, or whatever? There's very often I'll directly ask myself that question, like, well, why can't I do that? Like, what's that? And the answer 9.9 times out of 10 is like, there's nothing stopping you. Like, Amazing. You can just do it, man.
Amazing.
Like, you just have to take these steps and then, keep pushing. You'll be good.
And so talk us through the rest of the year. So obviously this tour, which is going to be really fun with supporting Alanis Morissette. What about for the last part of the year?
Sure. Let's see. So I just wrapped a documentary in the fall, late fall, early winter. I think that just got mixed. So I think that there's something going on with that. It's a documentary called Adapted. That was a great fun to score. It's a sports documentary following three people who have physical disabilities and who have adapted, who engage in adaptive sports and what their struggles and journey and life has been like, and kind of a deep dive into that. It's really cool. Great filmmaker, great story, great vibe, great pace, great everything. So hopefully that shows up and becomes public soon enough, and I think it will this year. Got this tour with Liz. Got a lot of stuff that I'm working on right now that unfortunately I can't really talk about. But I've been doing a lot of stuff in the kind of branded and ad world lately, scoring not just commercials, but like kind of campaigns around certain things, which I'm working on a few of those now. And they've been really fun to kind of live in more of a short form world. And then I'm doing like a bunch of these 30, 45 second, 1 minute long things, whatever they may be. And then in the fall, I've got, I think I mentioned earlier, a couple 2, 3, 4 different films right now that are all in various stages of getting prepared for at least when I'll touch them. So whether they're preparing to go into production now or just existing and developing in a place that hopefully will be in a place that I start working on them in the fall. And that's kind of it, really, at least on the work front. I'm getting married this year, so
congrats.
There is that too. Thanks. So that's not so much later this year, but yeah, that's kind of it. It's it feels like a nice, happy like medium of like cool work that I'm looking forward to, but also I'm not stressed really about much right now, work wise and just kind of life wise in general. So it's a good balance this year. I'm happy to be in the thick of it.
Sounds great. Well, listen, thank you for all the wisdom and advice that you've passed on. I think that the last question I'd like to ask you is, if you were to find out the planet was ending tomorrow, there was Armageddon tomorrow, there was an asteroid hitting Earth tomorrow, what do you think would be the biggest regret you'd have musically, that you think, damn, I never got around to that, or I said no to that and I should have said yes to it?
Yeah. Okay. Cool. I got one. I don't want to say names for this. But I got an opportunity in a few years ago to audition for a really, really, really big artist. Really. And it was cool. It came unexpectedly, but I was very flattered to be asked and all that stuff. And I put together a big, nice audition for the artist. It was the video. It was pre-COVID, so it was a video audition, like kind of before everyone was like super into like self-tapes and that kind of stuff. And as a result, I feel like I dropped the ball on the production of the video audition in a way that if I could have gone back, I would have like gone out a lot more than just like, here's like a phone camera on a tripod in my studio kind of thing. I would have rented out an actual studio or like a more flashy studio, maybe rented gotten a video crew and an audio crew and whatever, and done things a bit more professional with respect to the seriousness of the author. I feel like I not phoned it in, like I played my ass off for it. It's not that, but I feel like it could have been like, hey, who is this guy who like obviously cares enough about this to have invested so much, time, effort, money to make this thing look fucking awesome. And this is a great audition video. Like, I wish I would have done that rather than like, okay, this guy's playing, but like, it's just like a camera in his, in his studio at home. So that's one thing that I wish I would have maybe approached with a little bit more seriousness, a little bit more respect to the size of what that project and that artist was and is, which is all to say, like, I think goes back into what I was saying earlier about the biggest both critic but the biggest validator for me is the bar I'm setting for myself, and I think it's really important to do as best as you can for yourself and for your own standards all the time. And that's one situation that I could have done better.
That's good advice. And, I wonder if anybody else even thought of that who did get the gig. So I wouldn't be too harsh on yourself. But listen, thank you for all your wisdom, all your advice. Good luck with the tours coming up this year and the art, the projects you can't talk about. It's been really, really interesting chatting to you. And thanks for being such a great guest on the StageLeft Podcast.
Thank you so much, Chris. It's been really wonderful hanging out here and chatting.
Cool.